Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the most controversial issue, more controversial than Tawheed, because surely Tawheed is easy, it's in the Quran. And then we have the justice of God. Surely we all agree on the justice of God. We might use different formulas, but we all agree on it. And we all agree that there's prophets, us, them, everybody. But what about Al-Imamah? Do we all agree on Ali ibn Abi Talib? Do we all agree on what happened after the Prophet? Are we all of a like mind? Is the nation of Islam united on who was the successor of the Prophet? Absolutely not. There's this man, he's a historian and theologian, his name is Ash-Shahrastani. He was the first to say this. He said, مَا سُلَّ سَيْفٌ بِالْإِسْلَامِ كَمَا سُلَّ عَلَى الْإِمَامَةِ. He said, no issue has drawn the sword in Islam over any issue like the issue of Al-Imamah. He says the issue of Al-Imamah, this whole controversy of was it Ali or Abu Bakr, caused the most amount of bloodshed in Islam. Nothing compares to it in the amount of arguments and disagreements that they came up with. Now, obviously, we're team Amir al-Mu'mineen. And there are those who say it was Abu Bakr. But I want to ask you a question. I'm going to play, I don't say on the minbar, but devil's advocate. What if there's a chance historically that we're wrong? What if truly, how certain are we? Don't kill me just yet. Allah khalikum, ru'u shway. How certain are we that Imam Ali alayhi salam was definitely designated by Rasulullah? And of course, we'll say we're 100% certain. So until next week, what we want to do is, for those who want to become Islamic scholars and teachers in the future, you will bring me the evidence. You will go out in the world and find me what proof you have. Don't rely on me. I'm not going to be around forever. At least another 50 years, inshallah. But I'm not always available. And sometimes you might have to have a discussion with someone. And the Imams of Ahlul Bayt always say, be a decoration for us and do not be an embarrassment upon us. The last thing we want to do is have debates and discussions on things that we certainly do not understand. We want to make sure that we've crossed every T and dotted every I when it comes to the issue of Al-Imamah, because it is obviously what separates us from the rest. It is the most controversial issue. But what if we were wrong historically? How many history books have we read personally? Now don't tell me I asked Fulan and I asked Fulan. The answer was probably correct. I'm not saying it's not. But what book have we personally read? What notes have we taken down in our study book? How much of history did we go through and we saw it with our own eyes? All the evidence and we made notes of it. So it all comes from books. Every historical issue, for example, how do we know about the Romans? None of us were there. But we read history books. So first thing we have to do, to the best of our ability obviously, is read the history books written closest to the time of the Prophet. So, and what are the books that were written? We haven't finished the lecture yet. Everyone's whispering already. Now, we have to track down, what were the first history books written in Islam? When the Prophet passed from this world, there was only a Quran. There was no books other than the Quran. When was the first book of hadith written? We need to know that, because that will help. When was the first history book written? So other than the Quran, now we have a book called As-Sira Nabawiyya, the life of the Prophet. Everyone is a student of knowledge. We're all on the path to try to learn something, right? So when I pick up a history book, I don't trust it just because it's a book. No, I read it and I cross-reference the book itself. And then I see the next history book that was written. Or maybe there's a contemporary history book written. And I'll see how many of them have common themes and how many of them have contradictions. Oh, that's going to be, yeah. And I will provide the manhaj. So this is what we need. We need to think scholarly. So first, like we said, first thing is we don't have to trust anyone. It's okay. We're just learning. Of course, we believe Amir al-Mu'mineen is the successor. We have no doubt. Arusu Aini. But we're not always living amongst one another. Sometimes people ask us these questions. You know, and this is what I'm saying. For those who want to further their knowledge and be scholars, then the first thing you have to do is go back 1350 years history and read a book, for example, called Sirat ibn Hisham. The Seerah of Ibn Hisham. Ibn Hisham was a historian, and he was one of the first to write about the life of the Prophet. Now, do we have to trust Ibn Hisham? Of course not, we don't have to trust him. But let's see what he says. Let's see what he says in terms of the life of the Prophet and how much of that we can correlate with the Quran. There's another thing we have to do. The next history book we need to go through is Sirat ibn Yaqub. Sirat ibn Yaqub is very important. It was the very next one to be written. Now, do Ibn Hisham and Ibn Yaqub contradict one another? No, these books they're for everyone. Because, look, I'll tell you from the onset, you are not going to find a history book written by a Alawi scholar. Yeah, you're not gonna find it because obviously the Alawis were persecuted when they first came up, so they didn't have time, they didn't have universities, they weren't writing history books and that. And the earliest history book you might find from a Alawi scholar might be 100 or 200 years ago. And they've also referenced, I'll be very honest with you, they've also referenced Ibn Hisham, Ibn Yaqub, and At-Tabari. They've also referenced them because they were the very early ones. Now, there are even, the Sunnis had written the history before the Shias, for example. You never know, the earliest Shia history book might be 300-400 years after the Prophet. Might be after the Prophet. What else can we rely on other than history books? Quran will give you a big portion of history. The teachings of Ahlul Bayt, the Hadith. The Hadith is teachings, they're sayings, right? But these sayings happened in history. So our Imam spoke like Nahj al-Balagha will give you a big idea on what's happening. Nahj al-Balagha is another place to start. These are the sayings of Imam Ali. Imam Ali speaks about his political row with Abu Bakr, for example. So what you need to do is search through the history books. You can use ChatGPT if you like. You can use Google. There's no right or wrong yet. Because remember, I'll tell you something very important. That at the end of the day, Abu Bakr was a companion of Rasulullah. He lived at his day. So maybe Rasulullah said it was Abu Bakr and we don't know it. Ma'ule. Even though you'll find the proof is contrary to that, but I want you to see it for yourselves. I want you to go and look in Bukhari and Muslim and see all the instances that Imam Ali was praised above every single companion. I want you to read it with your very own eyes and save those references so that nobody can stand before you ever again. Not your community, but anybody else. So that's your homework. Next week.
They're not going to have time to go backward and read all these books. If Kitab al-Muraja'at.
Al-Muraja'at is a book that has gathered them all.
Kitab al-Muraja'at is translated in English. It's between scholar Shia and scholar Sunni. They talk together about this issue.
Yeah, they sent letters to each other and they actually cover the whole entirety of history. And if you want to know more, there's the history book I sent you in the group chat. So it's called a retestament or a restatement of the history of Islam. So if you start reading from midlife of the Prophet, from his midlife, say, you will find many instances, and these are all referenced in all the early books, the books of the Sunnis, for example, about how honored Imam Ali is and what his leadership position is. These, gather them in your own little notes so that we can discuss them next week, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. And I'll leave you with that because it's 9:02 وتعبنا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.